Hey, everybody. Glad that you are here tonight. We're having yet another one of our late night conversations. So should be good. So glad you're all here, and we're just gonna jump right into it. Here we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here with all of you tonight. We're having yet another late night conversation, just like we always do. We're following our usual format, which is first I give my opening remarks, which are then followed by the roll call. And then after that, I answer questions for the remainder of the show. Now, the way we get questions on Rumble is easy. You just send a Rumble rant. Now, the way we get questions on YouTube, unfortunately, has become complicated. We can no longer get super chats because the obnoxious censors of YouTube have demonetized this channel, which is annoying, but it's not gonna stop us. We will keep going. If you have a question for the second half of the show, the best thing to do is to Cash App me. Send me, just a tip on Cash App with your question attached to it. If you can't fit the question in, you can put your question in the chat and send your Cash App thing. That's the best way to do it. Cash App is the main way that people are able to send questions. Rumble rants work as well. If you want to set up a Rumble account, Rumble rants work as well. Let me put that in the chat. Questions can be sent as Rumble rants or on Cash App. And my Cash App handle is CalebMoppin22. So there we go. So we do have a couple announcements, just quick off the top of our head announcements, not off the top of our head. It's, the most recent, the most soon thing that's coming up is our workshop in California, in Los Angeles. It's going to be a very good workshop. Do you believe in growth? A new day for Los Angeles, a new day for America. It'll be on April 19th, which is not long from now, right? It's about to be the end of March. So if you're out in California, I don't get out to California very often. This is your opportunity to come chill with the rest of CPI. Get to know everybody. It should be good. On top of that, we are then our biggest event, the biggest event we have ever done, will be taking place in Chicago this summer, July 12th, 2025. And it's going to be huge. We have an auditorium that holds 500 people, and we are going to do our best to fill it. And that is not easy, but it's a challenge, but we are going to be successful, and I am confident. We are headed to Chicago. I'm actually headed to Chicago pretty soon to get together with everybody and start the ball rolling. So it's going to be great. So there's registration information down below about how to register for both of those events. I'm looking forward to engaging with you all and being in Chicago with you all and being in Los Angeles with you all. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Quick reminder, the way we do these things: first, I give my opening remarks. After that, we do the roll call and we find out who is watching, who's on the other side of the camera, names and locations. That's always fun. Then after that, I answer your questions for the remainder of the show. So yeah, send me a Rumble rant question on the Rumble. Send me a super chat question on Cash App. You can just Cash App me a question. And the second half of the show is all you guys answering your questions. People have been asking good questions lately, so send me questions. That's the best way to do it. Now, you'll all notice that I started about 9 minutes later than I had intended to start. And that's because, shout out to Phil in Brooklyn. If you're watching, Phil tipped me off about a breaking news story that I felt I needed to go investigate before I came on here. And I mean, it's something we should talk about because it fits in with everything we've been talking about on this channel for so long. Friends, I wish I got points, money for being right. I have been right about so much lately. I've been right about so many things. There are so many things I've seen coming. And it's not that I'm clairvoyant. I don't have psychic powers. I don't claim that I can see into the future. But I understand politics. I understand economics. I understand different political organizations and how they operate. And I'm able to pretty accurately assess where things are going and what's happening. That's something I have the ability to do. I can give my opinion. And that's why I'm frequently featured. I was on WBAI yesterday talking about Yemen. And I was with Garland Nixon. And I've been on many different radio shows and TV networks. And there's a reason that my expertise is widely appreciated. I've sold thousands of books. This is what I do. But in doing what I do, which is trying to understand the world while trying to build a movement to change the world and make the world a better place, I frequently get frustrated by something this has come up a lot lately. I get very frustrated by demagogy. I really am getting my patience with demagogy is running out. What we do here is not demagogy. Why? Because I do a huge amount of teaching on this channel. I do a huge amount of telling you things you don't know, explaining the way things work, helping you to understand things, and I give you concepts. Whereas the bulk of people on social media, the bulk of people out there doing, or at least purporting to do what we do not teach people anything. And they don't teach people anything, and nobody learns anything. They just reinforce emotions that people already have. And that's not helpful. You have to, there's a lot of important concepts you need to understand. You have to educate people. And that I would argue, and I have argued, that people are largely asleep. And I've frequently been coming back to a phrase I heard years ago about living biologically. That a plant is alive, a cat is alive, a mouse is alive, a dog is alive, a dandelion is alive, but they don't make conscious choices. They don't engage with and understand the environment around them. They don't interact with the environment and remold it. They don't use innovation or creative power. They just go through on a preordained path with no agency. And human beings are different than plants. Human beings are different than animals in that we have the ability to understand our environment and alter it and force it to serve us and interact with our environment in a more efficient way. And that understanding is central to my belief. And so I view my mission as not reinforcing the ways people are asleep, but rather to awaken people, awaken them to understand the world around them, awaken them to have agency and to try and change the world around them and to provide a community and the education that is necessary to help people to do so. And that is what I think the job of a revolutionary in our time is: to inspire people, to awaken people, to educate people. That is what we are doing. And I see so many people that are not doing that. They're not doing that. Now, what are they doing? They are reinforcing what people already believe. They're giving people an emotional oomph. If you hate Trump, they get on here and go, "Ah, we hate Trump." And if they like Trump, they get on here and go, "Ah, we love Trump." And nobody learns anything. Nobody learns anything, but everyone gets their emotional fix and they get, I got some emotions, and nobody gets any smarter, and nothing gets better in our country, and nothing gets better in the world. And that sucks. That absolutely sucks. And if I did that, I would have a much bigger channel. I'd have a huge channel if I just got on here and said, I hate Trump, or I like Trump, but that's not teaching you anything. You're not learning anything. Demagogy does not teach you anything. It just manipulates feelings and sentiments that you already have. And I would not be making any contribution to the world if I engaged in demagogy. And we have gotten on here and we've talked about a number of very important things, concepts about how the world works. We've come to understand them. And I have pointed to many things that are true. And, the last book that I published was this one, or a big book that I published in January is The Killing of Brian Thompson and the Danger of an American Years of Lead. Now, Amazon would not let me publish it under this title. They didn't like The Killing of Brian Thompson. So on Amazon, it's just called The Danger of an American Years of Lead. It's the exact same book, but they just didn't like the title. But I wrote this book in response to the glorification of Luigi Mangione. And I said, this is not good. This is not good. This is an intelligence operation. And furthermore, couple months before that, I think, in the fall, I wrote an article, which is, we redid our website. It's not up on our website, but I wrote an article that was pretty widely circulated where I warned people about red flag provocations. And it's interesting. I warned people about red flag provocations, and now, just in the last few hours, I'm seeing that I was right. I was right about Luigi Mangione. I was right about opposing terrorism, the danger of American Years of Lead, etc. Look, Peter Coffin, a beloved member of our community, he came out and said, burning Teslas is stupid. And he said this on Blue Sky, and they shut down his account for saying that. Can you believe this? We put out a press release on the CPI website. Now, they did restore it, but for roughly 24 hours, Peter Coffin was banned from Blue Sky for opposing terrorism. He said, don't burn Teslas, and they banned him. Meanwhile, there's people all over Blue Sky saying, burn Teslas, light Teslas on fire. Hey, burn Teslas, we hate Musk. And it's just absolutely crazy. And even here on Musk's app, there's people going, burn Teslas, we want to burn. And it's absolutely nuts. It's bonkers. It's bonkers. It's totally, totally bonkers. It's totally bonkers that there's people all over social media promoting and encouraging terrorism. They are celebrating the alleged crime of Luigi Mangione. They are encouraging people to destroy cars that because we don't like the owner of the company or whatever. And when now the news item that just happened in the last couple hours is an individual in Nevada who goes, his name is Paul Kim, Korean American. He's been arrested and charged with burning Tesla cars. He was responsible for the attacks on Tesla showroom or whatever in Las Vegas. Well, it is illegal to do that. He is innocent until proven guilty, just like anybody else, right? We don't know that he did it. What is disturbing, though, what is disturbing is that they are apparently linking him via Twitter to the Revolutionary Communist International, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and to the Communist Party USA. Now, I got to tell you, folks, as much as I'm not a huge fan of either of those groups, I'm just got to tell you the idea that those organizations were involved in burning Teslas, I would be very, very shocked. I would be beyond shocked if that was true, especially the Communist Party USA. The Communist Party USA is so opposed to anything that they consider to be adventurism. Literally all the Communist Party USA does is register people to vote for Democrats. So I would find that very shocking. But that's the latest news, right? Is that apparently this individual has been arrested. They're going to charge him at a federal level with terrorism for burning Tesla cars. And the news media is trying to link him to two communist groups, the Revolutionary Communist International, which is a Trotskyite organization, and with the Communist Party USA, which is very bizarre. Now, folks, I saw this summer as the election was happening, right? Let's go back a few months, right? Let's go back a few months. I wrote a book about Kamala Harris. My book was banned by Amazon, and then it went viral. It was banned on the day she became the nominee, and that created a huge amount of outrage, and thousands of copies of my book sold. I've never sold a book with that many copies. At least 4,000 copies of my book sold after Amazon banned it. I was watching and I was observing the election, and I noticed that something was happening. There was something called the Revolutionary Communist International, Revolutionary Communists of America, which is a Trotskyite group that was going around with big red flags and having rallies. They're having these little rallies where they just march around with big red flags. And I saw that, and the thing is, I saw that and I said, this is bad. This is very, very bad. And this is not good. And I urged people to be very careful of this. Be very, very, very careful of this. Now, there was a time where I would have encouraged that kind of thing. But I saw the context of the 2024 elections and I said, this is not good. 5-10 years ago, was it that long? It was probably longer than 5 or 10 years ago, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, around the aftermath of Occupy Wall Street and the couple years following Occupy Wall Street. I was in New York City and I organized marches against capitalism, and we would assemble with big red flags and we would march through the streets. And why did we do that? We did that because back then nobody was talking about those things. There was kind of a vague opposition to capitalism among the public. Bernie Sanders was starting to gain momentum. And at that time, I was trying to do the same thing that I'm doing now, educate people. And I wanted to teach people about imperialism. I wanted to teach people about the problem of overproduction. And so going out there and doing something that nobody was doing and loudly claiming a label that nobody was really claiming at the time. The communist groups existed, but they were not very visible. That was a way of doing so, right? It grabbed people's attention. Look, when Barack Obama was threatening North Korea, we went to the movie theater in Times Square that was showing the movie Red Dawn, which was an anti-North Korean film. We brought big pictures of Kim Il-sung. And we said, this movie is lying war propaganda. Korea wants peace. It was a great demonstration. We had North Korea's flag. It was a beautiful act of a way to get attention, show that there are North Koreans who support Kim Il-sung, or there are Americans who support North Korea. And it was shown on North Korean state TV, and it was a big deal. And I don't regret doing that one bit. And, at the time when nobody was talking that way, when we had the ability to say to people, this is what communism is, and attract attention, and then use that attention to educate people, I thought that was a productive thing to do. However, we're in very different times now. And in 2024, there was a presidential election going on. And Kamala Harris was the candidate who positioned herself as what the overwhelming majority of American people were against. She was the pro-war with Russia candidate. She was the pro-FBI candidate. She was the pro-government media censorship candidate. She was the pro-degrowth candidate and the pro-inflation candidate. Kamala Harris was the walking incarnation of everything that the American working people were against for good reason. She was in favor of more war. She was in favor of more of a low-wage police state. She was in favor of lots of very, very bad things. And the American people heard Donald Trump, who said he was going to make peace, who said he was going to stop the inflation, who said he would stop the FBI suppressing people's civil liberties and would protect free speech. People voted for Trump because they didn't like Kamala Harris, and they made the right decision. It's not to say that Trump has been great. Trump has been quite a disappointment, but it showed, it was a measurement of the consciousness of the American people. The consciousness of the American people rejected war with Russia, rejected degrowth, rejected attacks on free speech. And Donald Trump was positioning himself as on the right side. If you were against all the dangerous ways U.S. society is moving toward a war with Russia, toward suppressing civil liberties and a low-wage police state, if you were against that, Donald Trump was your man. Donald Trump was your man. Right? And it made sense. Made sense. Donald Trump, maybe he hasn't lived up to that. He's been in office for a little while, and I've been quite disappointed by many things that Donald Trump has done. But that said, he positioned himself as the candidate who was appealing to good things. However, he was constantly accusing Kamala Harris, who was more pro-war, at least in words, than he was, more pro-FBI repression, at least in words, than he was, more in favor of censorship than he was, more in favor of economic degrowth policies than he was constantly calling Kamala Harris a communist. He was saying Kamala Harris is a Marxist, Kamala Harris is a communist, etc. And all kinds of Americans who didn't want World War III, who didn't like censorship and all of that, were rallying against these things and thinking that they are communism. And that was certainly frustrating to me. But at the same time, the communists, the so-called communists in America, if you want to call them that, went along with this. They did. Nobody hates Russia more than the American communists do, right? Russia's a fascist, and if you support Russia, you're a Nazi, Putinist, fascist, and no one believes in degrowth more than the stupid American communists do, even though Marx said in the Communist Manifesto, the goal is a society of vast abundance, the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly. No, growth is bad. Humans are a cancer. The communists just went along with this. And they just went right along with this. And you would have, the Communist Party USA went into overdrive, that Trump has got to be defeated, that it's fascism, and that we got to support Kamala Harris at all costs. And the communists just went out there and they were just huge supporters of Kamala Harris. And they went along with all the evil things that Kamala Harris advocated, which the American people opposed. And Donald Trump was saying the whole time, and this is communism. This is communism. And it's gotten to the point that, communism has basically been taken over by woke liberalism. I'm not a communist anymore. I'm an innovationist, and we have entered a new phase, and that's a whole nother thing we can talk about. But as we were watching this happen, I wrote a statement that was put up on our website. It's not there now because we redid the website. And I noticed this group, the Revolutionary Communist International, the RCI. I noticed them running around with red flags. And they're just running around having these red flag hammer sickle rallies. Just running around, red flag hammer sickle, not teaching anybody anything, not saying how they're different than Kamala Harris, except they want more of what she's for, and just out there. And they were just basically scare porn for conservatives, right? And they're out there and they're, again, not teaching people anything. And there were other groups that suddenly sprung up out of nowhere and announced they owned communism. And it was very, 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 very odd. Very, 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 very odd. The whole thing was very, very weird. And so at the time, I urged people to avoid what I called red flag provocations. I said, don't get set up. Look what happened on January 6th. A lot of Trump supporters, they went out and they thought they were going to a rally in D.C. and they ended up going into the Capitol and then they ended up going to prison. And I said, be very careful of these red flag provocations. I'm using red flag as a double entendre, red flag in the name of communism, but also red flag as in, warning, and that's what I said. I said, be careful of these red flag provocations. Well, now, after the election, shortly after the election, right, the globalist elite, the candidate who was more in line with what they wanted, Kamala Harris, lost. Donald Trump had won, promising good things. Didn't exactly deliver as of yet, but, you know, I'm still hoping we might get peace with Russia, but he's been bad in a lot of ways. But regardless, Donald Trump won. Immediately after that, an insurance executive got killed on the streets of New York, right? This Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, you know, who, yeah, sure, not a good dude, right? Worked in an industry that deprives people of healthcare. I mean, we're not defending that individual, but he got killed, and they have arrested this young man, Luigi Mangione, for doing it. And immediately, social media just exploded with support, assuming he did it, right? Claiming he was guilty, and then exploded with, and that's a good thing. And at the time, I spoke up and said, no, that is not a good thing. That is a bad thing. Lawless violence and assassinations don't get health care for people. We need a real movement. And I was so outraged and annoyed by all these people, the very same people that had canceled Jimmy Dore for trying to organize Medicare for all marches and trying to organize Force the Vote. They were out there saying murder, cold-blooded murder on the streets of New York City was a good thing. And so I wrote this book on the question, the killing of Brian Thompson and the danger of an American years of lead. And I said, no, we need a real movement. And that when there was an attempt to build a real movement with the Medicare for all marches, the left went into cancel culture overdrive against that movement, went against it. And that we need to build a real movement, and that movement needs to mobilize against imperialism and needs to connect the struggle against the big monopolies with the struggles of working families here in this country, and etc. And that we need a real movement. We don't need terrorism, right? And I repeated the standard leftist critique that you'll get from revolutionary leaders around the world objecting to what they call adventurism, lone wolf acts of terrorism, etc. But from there, I also pointed out that there were a number of examples throughout the history of the Cold War where there was a country where you had a genuine anti-imperialist movement arising, and that escalating to violence was a mechanism for keeping the status quo in power. And I talked about the years of lead. The primary example was in Italy with the years of lead. But I also talked about Jamaica. I also talked about the efforts to confuse the struggle in Northern Ireland, and how this idea that escalating to violence gets us closer to, you know, some kind of working class revolution. That's not the truth. And that genuine revolutionaries have always opposed terrorism and always opposed left adventurism and would prefer a peaceful transition. However, the rich and powerful generally, you know, often become very violent and illegal to prevent a peaceful transition. People have the right to defend themselves. Lincoln wanted a peaceful transition, a peaceful revolution to abolish slavery. He's a great example. Abraham Lincoln, he was praised by Karl Marx. He was called the single-minded son of the working class. He was a great American revolutionary. The U.S. Civil War was the second American Revolution. Lincoln wanted it to be a peaceful revolution. He was elected on a platform of opposing slavery and not allowing to expand, but the slaveholders became violent and they took up guns against the Republic. And so Lincoln was forced to carry out a violent revolution in response to the violence that was being used to try and overturn the democratic process. And that is the whole history. You look in China, Mao Zedong wanted a coalition government with Chiang Kai-shek. He did everything he could to try and form a coalition government with Chiang Kai-shek. But Chiang Kai-shek wouldn't allow it. He tried to forcibly disarm the Chinese people and take away the land that had been redistributed. And it got to the point they had no choice, right? The Bolsheviks, they wanted to take power peacefully. They wanted to take power peacefully. And the main way they took power was defending the provisional government from the Kornilov reaction, from a military general who tried to overthrow the Democratic Republic. That adventurism, just picking up guns and doing stupid things, lone wolf assassinations, attacking and burning car dealerships. These things are opposed by genuine revolutionaries and always have been. And I've been making this point for years. I've studied William Z. Foster. I've studied Gus Hall. I've studied Marx and Lenin and what they've written about it. And I've always said, no, we oppose terrorism. We oppose terrorism, etc. We support people's right to defend themselves, but we do not advocate left adventurism and isolated acts of terrorism. We just don't. And they are not in the interests of the global struggle. And every time I say this, I get a bunch of people flipping out. And this is why I'm not a communist anymore. This is why I'm an innovationist. I don't want anything to do with these people. Every time I say this, I get a bunch of angry people. No, I want a violent revolution. Oh, no, you're weak. You're a revision. And I get all these people tweeting at me on the internet, tweeting at me. Oh, no, you're a weak coward. Yeah. And why? Because I swear the majority of people who become communists are not interested in how the economy works, are not interested in what imperialism is and why it's bad. They are 14-year-old boys who want to be Che Guevara, and they want to run through the woods with guns, and they want to play army like children. And when I get on there and say that's not what communism is really about, they just lose their minds. No, I want to run through the woods. I want to play army. I want to be in an action movie. And they flip out at me. And it's like, there's so many layers to this. But first of all, if any of these people were at all serious about if they were going to go be the next Luigi Mangione, if they were going to go burn Teslas, I would hope, at least have the common sense to not tweet at me for opposing it. I would hope that they would at least, realize that that's evidence at your trial, right? None of these 14-year-old boys are ever going to do that. None of them are ever going to do anything political. They're just on the internet being children. And I have no time for this. I really have no time for this. I am opposed to imperialism. I understand we need to reorganize our economy to function in a rational way. We need a new America for working families. I understand this, and I understand that we're not going to get it from 14-year-olds on the internet who want to be Che Guevara, okay? And the fact that they're triggered by me pointing out standard orientation, I mean, it's infuriating to me. But it's also very dangerous. And that, this guy, this Paul Kim, I don't know who he is. He's innocent until proven guilty, as far as I know. I mean, I really doubt these two communist organizations have anything to do with him. Anyone can say they're anything on Twitter, right? Anyone can say they're anything on Twitter. I haven't seen the evidence, but it appears this could be utilized. There's a crackdown going on free speech, right? They have already said that if you engage in free speech opposing Israel, that's promoting terrorism, and they will deport you from the country if you're not a citizen. Right. And that's the Mahmoud Khalil case and some other students now that are facing this kind of deportation. That is very dangerous. That's a big problem. And now it appears that not only is this individual who is alleged to have committed a real crime being targeted, they're now using that to say that your right to advocate communism or advocate, communist ideology or be part of one of these different communist sects, that's now in question, apparently, according to the media. That's really dangerous. That is extremely dangerous, right? And, if there's any proceedings, I would happily go and testify as an expert on the works of Marx and Lenin and explain that adventurism and lone wolf terrorism is something that serious revolutionaries have always opposed. I doubt they will want my testimony. But I would happily go up and say that, and that no serious organization in America that is actually serious about politics advocates terrorism and left adventurism. But that said, there's loads of stuff on social media advocating left adventurism and terrorism. Loads. There's just loads. And is it then surprising that they can then use that to crack down? This is not good. This is not a good situation. But this is why we have to be innovationists. Look, I am not interested. I am not interested in red flags. I am not interested in hammers and sickles. I'm interested in economics. I oppose the system of globalism, imperialism. I would like an economy where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. And I believe in economic growth. We need growth. We need to unleash the productive forces, and the contradiction between technological advancement and the irrationality of the market needs to be gotten rid of. No one should be hungry because too much food has been produced. No one should be homeless because there are too many houses. We need a government of action that will fight for working families, that will rationally organize the economy to unleash the productive forces, the means of production, the banks and the factories and the industries, the centers of economic power, should be organized to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. And this global economic system called imperialism, globalism, this order where big banks and monopolies grind countries into poverty in order to keep themselves at the top and enrich themselves and keep countries in a state of underdevelopment, hold back human progress, this system needs to be gotten rid of. That's what I believe in. And communists don't believe that. And they've made that overwhelmingly clear to me over the last decade. They have made clear to me communists do not believe in that. And the last thing any communist would ever like to do is teach you anything. No, they want to wave a red flag in your face. They want to show you how cool they look in their Soviet military outfit. They want to, tell you how awesome they think it is when someone got killed. Luigi killed that guy. Awesome. He killed. That's evil. That's dumb. It's stupid, and it's not helpful. And, in order to completely separate from this idiocy that is not helping the struggle against imperialism, that is not raising people up out of poverty, that is not leading to a new America for working families, in order to separate from that, we are now a new movement. We are the Center for Political Innovation. We are innovationists, right? We are innovationists. And, I'm looking at this situation where this guy got arrested. They're trying to link him to communist groups. I'm shaking my head. I am shaking my head because, I hate to say I told you so. I would like to be wrong about these things. I would like to be wrong about these things. But I am really not happy to see my country deteriorate into political violence. I'm not happy to see it. I love America. I'm not happy to see my country deteriorate into the years of lead. The years of lead were not good for Italy. Look at Italian history, the 60s to the 80s, when people were blowing up stuff and shooting each other. And that was very, very bad for Italy. You look at Jamaica, the 70s and 80s was very bad for Jamaica. You look at the wave of political violence, Jamaica has really not recovered from that. A lot of the drug cartels and organizations that set up shop during that period are still there. This is not a good thing. Right. And we can't advocate our country deteriorating into a country with gangs and counter gangs shooting each other and assassinating each other. This is bad. This is very, very bad. It's awful. It's not good. And if we are motivated by love of our country and love of our community, opposition to this satanic international global order that is grinding people into poverty, we have to oppose terrorism. We have to oppose this. It's hard. It's very, very hard. It's very, very hard to not, and again, I don't know. There's a lot of things I could say tonight. I'm fired up and I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated because I feel like the left very much brought this situation on, and that, again, there is way too much going along with whatever's trendy, going along with whatever's popular, right? Someone said to me the other day, the people are with Luigi Mangione. No, they're not. The internet is with Luigi Mangione. Polls have shown the overwhelming majority of American people do not think the murder of a CEO, the random lone wolf killing of a CEO on the streets of Manhattan, was a good thing. However, all over the internet, especially in leftist spaces, people think that. But no, the people of America are not in favor of this. And, there's just so many layers to this. I get frustrated by it. So that's why I'm on here. I do apologize to those of you who watch, and there may be an element of repetitiveness to these live streams, right? We do go over the same concepts over and over again. But the reason we do that is because nobody talks about these concepts. Nobody talks about them. And because of that, we have to raise them. Nobody talks about them. And I want you to be able to teach them to people. I want you to be able to tell people about value crisis, overproduction, the tendency of the falling rate of profit. I want you to be able to tell people about globalism, imperialism. I want you to be able to tell people about how we need a rationally organized economy that will be organized to unleash growth and human innovation and productive forces. I need you to be able to teach these concepts to people. I'm not here to pander to what you already believe. I'm here to teach you. I am here to teach you. And in the process of teaching you, I would like you to learn how to teach these concepts as well. If we're going to save our country, we need to learn. We need to think. We need to think. So first, this is a great clip. It's from a documentary about a CPI conference that we did a few years back. And this clip will tell you the problem with capitalism. I mean, this clip will explain to you why it is we're having an economic meltdown right now, right? And I can put this clip on. It'll save me having to write it all out for you. But, like, this is the problem that we're living under. So here we go.
Explain what needs to be explained, what used to be considered Marxism 101, about why it is that our Western capitalist economy is crashing and burning. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to do some math. And I hate math. Do you know why I hate math? Because I grew up in America. I went to public school in the United States of America. So I am going to, at risk of embarrassing myself, because math was never my best subject, I'm going to do some mathematics here on the board for you to explain the problem.
I very much enjoyed Caleb's speech.
So if you are creating a product, right? If you're a factory owner, you're making a product, you are going to need the material through which that product is made, the manufacturing materials. So that'll be A.
The simple equation you put forward to explain the crisis of overproduction and the falling rate of profit.
And you're probably going to need to transport the product to where it's sold. That's B.
It broke down where your money goes.
You're also going to have to pay your labor costs. Labor costs are represented by C.
Explanations of those concepts that people are able to understand.
Then when consumers purchase the product, they're going to pay a final price. And that final price is D. However, there's a problem with that.
I like the fact that he framed it that way to make it very clear.
Which is that the capitalist can't change how much A costs. He can't change how much B costs. So the profit of the capitalist can only be extracted from the value put into it by the worker. And this is the basis of Marxism, the understanding of surplus value.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere. I've never been able to explain it that simply.
So C, the labor value, is divided. You have C1, which is what the worker actually gets paid. And then you have C2, which is the profit that the capitalist makes. And it all adds up to D, which is the final cost of the product. Now, the way people in the United States who talk about Marxism generally talk about this is they say, well, this is unfair. They say the worker is not getting paid the full value of his labor. But they're missing one of the most important points, which is not just that it's unfair and then people argue, well, what about the employer? He put up the money, doesn't he deserve to be? That's all a distraction. Because the important thing to understand is this. C1 is always going to be less than D. The wages paid out to the worker are never enough to buy back the product that he produces. There is always more products created than there are wages paid out to the worker. And this is the built-in problem of capitalism, the problem of overproduction. And it is always there in the capitalist economy. It never goes away. And they have invented all kinds of crazy mechanisms to try and deal with the problem of overproduction. Part of the reason that the US government has purchased billions and billions of dollars worth of cheese only to bury it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, is to deal with this problem. It is an ongoing present problem, and it's a problem acknowledged by most capitalist economists. John Maynard Keynes said the problem was underconsumption rather than overproduction, but he was pointing to the same problem. The military-industrial complex in the United States is an effort to deal with this problem, to keep spending going. There's all kinds of mechanisms that they've invented to try and resolve this problem, but it gets worse. What is the capitalist always trying to do? He wants to maximize the amount of profit he makes. And one of the main ways they do that is with what's called labor-saving technology. Get rid of workers and replace workers with machines. As they eliminate workers from the process of production, as there's fewer and fewer workers involved, as machines take the place of workers, the role of C in production decreases. There's a little bit of a problem with that. As As C goes down, C2 also goes down, right? As C decreases, C2 also decreases. And as the role of the worker in production is reduced, the rate of profit that the capitalist makes goes down. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. Only human labor creates value. And this is something that Adam Smith acknowledged. This is something some of the popes even acknowledge. Human labor creates all value. And so when you reduce the role of human labor in production, the amount of value created decreases, and the ability of the capitalist to extract surplus value also decreases. So this causes the capitalist to have to churn out even more products because he's making less and less of a profit on the overall product. He's making less and less of a percentage, so he has to churn them out. So this problem of the worker never being able to buy back what he produces and more products being created than are necessary, this problem becomes exacerbated. And this points to what is understood to be the deeply irrational nature of the capitalist system.
That is the problem. Capitalism creates a situation where the more wealth that is created, the poorer everyone gets. Great example is self-driving cars. Why in the world would self-driving cars be a bad thing? This chore called driving would no longer be necessary. And all the human labor power that goes to sitting behind the wheel and driving, Uber drivers, cab drivers, truck drivers, traffic court employees, state highway patrolmen, you name it, could all be eliminated. And human beings could expend their labor power elsewhere, and we'd have a much more productive society. Except in our irrational system, you can only work so long as you rent yourself out to a boss, and millions of people who drive a truck for a living or drive a car for a living or work in a traffic court or whatever, millions of people would then be out of work. Automation should be a good thing. There is nothing wrong with human technology and human advancement, but we need an economic system that can facilitate it. We need an economic system that is rationally organized so this completely irrational problem is gotten rid of. We shouldn't have a situation where in order to keep the price of dairy high, the U.S. government purchases billions of dollars worth of cheese and buries it in a cave. That shouldn't exist. We should not have a situation where in order to just keep the economy churning along, the U.S. government has to spend billions and billions of dollars on tanks and guns and weapons. This shouldn't happen. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a situation where the major centers of economic power, the big banks, are under popular control. We need a situation where our natural wealth, our oil and our natural gas and our coal and our timber are under public control. And we can utilize centralization of credit, a great national bank, to send credit into the economy as we want it, to stimulate communities, right? If we decide that we'd like more prosperity in this region, we loan people money to start businesses in that region. If we want to, we want more housing to expand the population in this area, we loan people, we give people good loans to get mortgages and have houses in that area. We need centralization of credit. We need public control of our natural resources. We need, in addition to that, to rebuild the country, to mobilize high-speed railway, etc. And then we need to start investing in our population. We need to provide education, good education to the American people so they can be smarter and that we once again have the best engineers, the best scientists. We have smart people. And on top of that, we need to provide health care to people, not as a handout or a gift, but because we need a healthy population to go out and be productive and build. Right? We need to provide universal employment. No human being who is able-bodied and has productive ability should be left idle. We should utilize all the labor power of human beings to go out and build and construct. Right? We need a rationally organized economy where human labor power is unleashed. Human creativity is no longer held back by the irrationality of a system where self-driving cars are a bad thing and greater abundance leads to greater poverty. We need to centralize and rationally organize the economy so that we utilize and unleash human intelligence to grow and build. That is what I believe. And At one time, I called that communism. I do not call that communism anymore. Communism is a bunch of teenagers running around going, blah, burn Teslas, hate Trump. And I'm not that. I'm not that. Right. And we are in a new stage. And the reason China is soaring ahead is because in China, they have 5-year economic plans, and the major banks are controlled by the state, and they control and plan out their economy, and they invest in their population. They train engineers, they train scientists. And that's why they're doing very, very well. And they have the second largest economy in the world. And 800 million people have been lifted out of poverty. And that's why they're having all kinds of great technological breakthroughs. And the reason that Russia went from being an impoverished agrarian country to being a superpower that defeated the Nazis and invented space travel and did all these amazing things was because they had a rationally organized economy, right? And there are many examples of this, of countries breaking out of globalism, imperialism, the system where big bankers and monopolies have the power, and setting out on a course of independent economic development and having great success. Right? I mean, Vietnam is having the Vietnamese economic miracle. And the market has a role in all of this. Private stores, private restaurants, private high-tech firms, they're an essential part of what you would call 21st century socialism, right? You go to Venezuela, you go to Cuba, you go to North Korea, you go to China. They have worked very hard to prop up and create and fund a layer of small business owners, innovators, people that can play an innovative role, that can have their own business. So we're not opposed to that kind of thing. This is all a new stage, right? Marxism, Leninism, communism laid the foundation for this, right? There would be no modern China without communism. There would be no modern Russia without communism. You would never have had the wave of anti-colonial revolutions that swept the world without communism. But like Burkina Faso, Penny, a member of our group, wrote a beautiful article about Burkina Faso, the military, which is an anti-imperialist force that is sympathetic to Russia. Burkina Faso has a military government that is now overseeing an agricultural revolution, right? And they're greatly expanding the capacity of this African country to produce its own food. And it's amazing what they are doing. It is dynamic and exciting what this Burkina Faso government is doing. And they're doing it inspired by the communist leader, Thomas Sankara, in the history of the country, who led the country briefly before he was removed. And they're doing it in coordination with Russia and China. Is it communism? Well, they're not calling it that. And it's certainly not Cold War communism. They're not setting up a completely state-run economy. But they have broken out of imperialism. They have broken out of globalism, imperialism, and the rule of the big bankers. They're aligned with Russia. They're aligned with China. They're pro-growth, and they're using the military and the state to construct and expand their productive capacity. That's what I'm for. I am for a pro-growth, pro-human, pro-working families government. That is what I am for, and I am against globalism. I am against imperialism. I'm against Malthusianism, the notion that there are too many people in the world. I am pro-humanity. I am an innovationist, and that is what we need. And communism laid the foundation for that, but communism had its issues, right? I think dialectical materialism is a bit of a problem. I think that red flag aesthetic is a bit of a problem. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We urgently need to build a movement that will bring us that. And burning Teslas is not going to bring us that. Murdering CEOs is not going to bring us that. And demagogy and just getting on the internet and reinforcing people's negativity and their anger or whatever, that's not going to bring it either. Look, I just want to speak to you on a spiritual level. All right. I made a video. I said, praising Luigi Mangione is bad for your mental health. If you celebrate somebody else getting hurt, you are hurting yourself. And let me say that again. If you celebrate somebody else getting hurt, you are hurting yourself. All right. You might say, wow, that other person, they got hurt. And you're hurting also. It's just not as visible, but you're psychologically damaging yourself. The more that you become bitter, the more that you become spiteful, the more that you become vengeful, the less effective of a person you will be. Nobody likes a vengeful person. Nobody wants to do business with a vengeful person. No one likes a spiteful person. No one wants to be friends or associate with a spiteful person, right? And I'm just telling you that we, at this time, we have to push back against all these negative emotions that are being promoted by internet demagogues. Internet demagogues are promoting negative emotions, and they have turned it into practically an Olympic sport of selling you resentment, selling you jealousy, selling you spitefulness, selling you anti-human negativity, and you have to be vigilant and you have to push back against that. You do. You really, really do. And we, unfortunately, there's a lot of that in the history of communism, and we have to push back against that. We have to push back against that. And look, I warned you all about red flag provocations, and now we're seeing somebody got arrested, and they're trying to blame it on the Revolutionary Communist International that was marching around with the red flags. And I'm just telling you, I was right again. I was right again. I mean, this guy's innocent until proven guilty, but it looks like guilt by association. They're trying to link him to this guy. And I'm just telling you, I see what needs to be done. I see the kind of movement this country urgently needs, a movement that lifts people up, a movement that celebrates human creativity and innovation. That is the kind of movement we urgently need in this country, not a movement based on vengefulness, not a movement based on negativity. And, Peter Coffin, he made a video saying, don't burn Teslas, and Blue Sky banned him for that video. And it took 24 hours for them to go, oops, oopsie daisy. And there's people all over Blue Sky celebrating the burning of Teslas. Like, this is crazy. This is an intelligence operation to foment a culture of political violence in order to keep the USA and NATO. And we've got to oppose this intelligence operation. And we have got to build the real solid bonds that can bring people together. That is what we must do. We must build an anti-imperialist movement to lift up the American people. That's what we got to do. And, it's not the answer that's going to, get me huge amounts of attention. If I was just on here reinforcing your negative emotions, telling you who to hate or telling you how bad people you already hate are, yeah, a lot more people would watch me. But you wouldn't be learning anything. And that's the point. I am here to teach you. I am here to help you learn. And that is something that we urgently need. We need to awaken people. We need to inspire people. We need people to start making conscious decisions and take ownership over their future and the future of their country, the future of their community, the future of our world. We need you to awaken. And in order to awaken, I have to teach you. And I can't just engage in demagogy, and I can't just reinforce what you already feel. I have to teach you stuff. And you're here because you want to learn. And I appreciate all of you. I really do. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have a desire to learn. And so thank you for being here. But let me just reiterate quickly what I've said. Number one, the problem with capitalism, the problem with the system where profits are in command, is that it holds back human potential. It checks and limits productivity because abundance creates poverty, and you have big economic crises after great technological leaps, right? That's the thing. This is the problem. Imperialism, globalism, the rule of the world by big banks and monopolies. This system is bad because it holds back development. It keeps countries in poverty. It prevents countries from lifting themselves up, developing their own industries, etc. In the 1990s, when imperialism, globalism reconquered Russia, it was an absolute economic disaster. Andre Gunder Frank called it economic genocide. People were leaving the country and dying, etc. And Russia broke free from that. Russian President Vladimir Putin reasserted state control over oil and gas, and he used the oil and gas revenue to subsidize and rebuild the industries. And Russia is now strong because they broke out of imperialism. And there's many examples of this. Libya broke out of imperialism. It was an impoverished agrarian society. They had a king who was put in power by the British, And Gaddafi, a leader of the military, led the people of Libya to seize control of their country, seize control of their oil, and they started building. And they built the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River, and they wiped out illiteracy, and they wiped out poverty and homelessness, and they had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. And then imperialism was able to reconquer Libya in 2011, and now Libya is a wreck. The country doesn't have full electrification. They've blown up the power plants. There's modern-day slave markets. People are drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get out. It's been underdeveloped again. Imperialism is about stopping development. Anti-imperialism is about bringing development, right? And this message I have to say on here over and over and over again, because we have all been told that imperialism is Dances with Wolves. Imperialism is the movie Avatar. Imperialism is that there's these beautiful, naked, indigenous people who are magical and spiritual, and they just dance around and they're happy all the time, and they have no technology, and they're just so happy. And imperialism is the evil colonizer coming and giving them technology. And that's not what imperialism is. Imperialism is keeping people impoverished and forcing them as captive markets. Go read the history about Gandhi. What was Gandhi arrested for doing? Burning a fire and boiling salt water. That's what he was arrested for doing. He was arrested for making his own salt, right? He got a bunch of salt water from the ocean and he put it in a pot and he lit a fire underneath it to boil it so he could have his own salt. And you weren't allowed to make your own salt in India, because you had to buy your salt from the British Empire. And so the British arrested him for making his own salt, right? And that was the issue, right? When the British went to India, they burned down all the looms. The people in India had been weaving for thousands of years. And the British showed up and they burned all the looms. They forced them to import all their cloth from the British textile industry. That's imperialism. Imperialism isn't going to a bunch of people that are living in the woods and making them work in looms. No, it's going to a bunch of people who have looms, burning the looms down, grinding them into poverty, and forcing them to spend whatever little money they have to buy their cloth from you, right? I mean, Iraq, great example. Iraq was an oil-producing country. Huge amount of oil was exported from Iraq. They sold it to the French. They sold it to other people. And what did the United States do? It went to Iraq and blew it to shreds and destroyed it. And there was a New York Times article. They said, what did the war in Iraq accomplish? And they said China won the war in Iraq. No, China didn't win the war in Iraq. And they pointed out Iraq's oil exports are roughly 10% of what they were under Saddam Hussein. They were making 10 times as much oil as they make now. And now the world economy still runs on oil. All those people that were buying their oil from Iraq are now buying it from where? They're buying it from the United States. They're buying it from the U.S.-aligned Saudi Arabia. They're buying it from ExxonMobil and BP, Shell, and Chevron. They're buying it from Nigeria, that is under the grip of the American oil companies. And so a competitor, a country that had seized control of its own resources and was building itself up by selling its own oil, has been destroyed. That's why the USA invaded Iraq. And that's why the USA destroyed Libya. Libya was a country that had seized control of its natural resources, was building itself up, was developing, and now they underdeveloped it. And that's what imperialism is. Imperialism is preventing development. It is keeping people in poverty. Guatemala is a country. 1953, Guatemala elected a president, and his name was Jacobo Arbenz, and he was trying to establish independence in Guatemala. And so the USA hired the military of Guatemala and the CIA, and they overthrew him. And to this day, there are parts of Guatemala where people don't have running water, people don't have electricity, people don't speak Spanish, they speak indigenous languages, and they're in extreme poverty. And in extreme poverty, they're kept in chronic underdevelopment. However, if you go to Nicaragua, which is a country that broke out of imperialism, they had a revolution in 1979, and it's been a lot of development since then. In Nicaragua, they are fully electrified. They have wiped out illiteracy in the country, and they grow their own food, and they, despite all kinds of sanctions imposed on them, despite all kinds of stuff, they've actually done a lot because they've developed, they've broken out of imperialism. Imperialism is about holding back and stopping development. And this is something that is constantly obscured, right? It's not Avatar. It's not Dances with Wolves. Imperialism is not bringing technology and bringing development. Imperialism is preventing countries from doing that and keeping them in poverty, right? And this, I cannot repeat this enough. You have to repeat this. You have to get people to understand this, right? Because this is what the imperialists always say. We're bringing civilization. No, you're not. The British did not bring civilization to India. The British reinforced the caste system in ancient India. The British reinforced a lot of the backward and primitive things that existed in India because it was a way of keeping the country underdeveloped, right? I mean, there's many, you know, in China, the imperialists, they hate the Chinese Communist Party, and they reinforce those who glorify feudalism. The Falun Gong is practically a U.S. government-funded outlet that's trying to destabilize and overthrow the Chinese government. The USA isn't, the people of China wanted to lift themselves up and wanted to get away from those traditional practices like foot binding, etc. Imperialism is not about bringing development. And if you look at who the imperialists support around the world, they support the most backward and primitive people. Do you think ISIS an advanced group of people? Are they modern? Are they modernizing the Middle East? Of course not. ISIS is trying to go backwards, right? ISIS wants to restore the 1400s. They want to go back to the caliphate. But where did ISIS come from? They were funded. They was the people that the USA was funding to overthrow the Syrian government. That's who the USA supported. Where do you think Osama bin Laden came from? He was a Saudi billionaire who was used by the United States in Afghanistan to fight against the government in Afghanistan that was modernizing the country, the People's Democratic Republic of Afghanistan that was building and modernizing and electrifying. This is what you have to understand. Imperialism is about holding back development. It is about keeping countries in poverty, right? And nobody understands any of this. Nobody understands this, right? And I'll tell you who especially doesn't understand it, the communists. No communists understand this. They understand that they're really mad and they love the red flag. They understand that the hammer and sickle is really cool. They understand that Luigi's so cool because he shot somebody. That's what they're thinking about. They don't give a shit about any of this. I'm here to tell you the reality of the situation. Imperialism is an economic system where big bankers and big monopolies in Western countries keep the world poor and hold back development. That's what imperialism is. And the problem with capitalism, as I stated before, is that it creates a situation where abundance creates poverty, where technological advancement leads to poverty. That's a point that I've made on these streams over and over and over again. And the second point that I've made over and over and over again is imperialism is about holding back development. It's about keeping countries in poverty. And I have to say that over and over and over and over again. The problem with capitalism is not that it creates growth, and growth is bad. And why don't we all just go back to nature, man? Stuff is bad. We need to not be consumed. That has nothing to do with Marxism. The problem with capitalism is that it holds back growth. The problem with imperialism is that it holds back growth. That is the problem. That is the problem. And I cannot repeat that over and over again. And on top of that, I will repeat a point I've made here over and over again. Terrorism, left adventurism, assassinations, bombing Teslas, none of that helps anything. And again, I see people all over social media saying the opposite. Oh, we don't like Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. No one got health care because Brian Thompson was shot down on the streets of Manhattan. Nobody. Right? It did not advance, did not get us closer to having a healthcare system that benefited working families. It's going to take a mass movement to do that. And terrorism is a surefire way to make sure we don't have a mass movement. That's number one. Number two, right? Left adventurism, terrorism, burning Teslas or whatever, that is only leading to reinforce the red team, blue team mentality, right? The Democrats were in power for 4 years, folks. They had their anti-Trump revolution. They jailed all the January 6 people, and they didn't move 1 inch toward getting us health care. Not 1 inch. Not 1 inch. They didn't do anything. The only reason that they're hauling out Bernie Sanders and AOC, the rodeo clowns, the only reason they're hauling them out is because there's no election going on. So yeah, go out and cheer for Bernie, go out and cheer for AOC, and then they're going to forget all about Medicare for all, college for as soon as there's election. The Democrats don't give two shits about any of that. Meanwhile, the Democrats really do want war, and they really want war with Russia, and they really want political repression. And people voted for Trump because he said he was not going to do that. Now he's doing it, right? He's bombing Yemen. Horrendous. I am loudly opposed to the bombing of Yemen. So much so, I have a special project that I'm going to talk to you all about later tonight, but I'm very, very loudly opposed to the bombing of Yemen. I'm very, very loudly opposed to the deporting of Mahmoud Khalil. What Donald Trump has been a huge disappointment. Now I'm hoping we can see peace with Russia. That is what I'm hoping for. And I'm hoping that his efforts to improve things, the negotiations in Riyadh, the phone calls between, I'm hoping we can see an end to the Ukraine war. That would be like one thing that Trump could do that would be good. But I am telling you that we are in a situation where if you burn Teslas, what is that? Right? What are the attacks on Teslas? It's saying we don't like Elon Musk and he is in Trump's cabinet, so we're going to violently attack something associated with him. And it's a threat on people who buy Teslas. It's a threat on people who support Trump. It's violence. And what do people do? How do people generally respond to people that want to kill them, that people want to harm them? Right? If somebody lit your car on fire, would you go, well, by golly, I want to hear their side of the story. Why this person just lit my car on fire, vandalized a very treasured personal item of mine. I'm going to go listen and see if I can understand his perspective. By golly, well, thank you for lighting my car on fire. Now tell me why you don't like Musk. I'm anxious to hear about it. I wasn't going to listen to you before, but then you committed a horrendous act of property destruction against me and my family, and that makes me think I'm going to listen to you. Ugh, nobody is going to and what does that lead to, right? If you're a Republican and you own a Tesla and somebody lights your Tesla on fire, your response is going to be, I hate Democrats. That's all that's going to come out of it. It's going to reinforce. I mean, and we don't get any better. This red team, blue team bullshit needs to go. It absolutely needs to go. I want Medicare for all. I also don't want women's sports to be dominated by people that were born as men. Right now, I don't understand the specifics of everything, and I'm not going to go to fight on that issue. But I don't think that if you want Medicare for all, you de facto have to want, women and men in women's sports. Right? I think you can want Medicare for all and not want women in men's sports, or vice versa. Right? I think that you can want a society that invests in its population by providing education, and not want war with Russia, right? And that this red team, blue team, it's fandom. It's not politics, right? It's not about what's right and what policies will actually improve things in our country. It's what team are you on? Are you with my side? Are you with the other side? And it's a death spiral. It is an absolute death spiral. Look, I thought Trump was the lesser of two evils in the last election, and I stand by that because Kamala Harris, Trump was talking better than Kamala was on a lot of issues, and Kamala was reassuring us that she was going to give us more of the same. Trump appealed to the best in people. He appealed to people's belief in free speech. He appealed to people's belief that we should have peace in the world. He's not delivering, and that's disappointing. But if people had all voted for the candidate who didn't appeal to people's desire for peace, who didn't promise free speech, that would be a problem, right? I think people voted for Donald Trump for good reasons, and it's good that people voted for somebody with good reasons. I wish Trump would deliver. He needs to show that America first doesn't mean Israel first. Donald Trump needs to show that free speech means that you have the right to engage in lawful protests against Israel. Israel doesn't deserve to have American soldiers sent to the Red Sea to do its dirty work. I will say that over and over again. I should be able to say that. I should be able to say that if I was born in Zimbabwe. I should be able to say that if I was born in South Korea. I should be able to say that if I was born in Ohio. I should be able to say that if I was born in Azerbaijan. Everyone should have the right to criticize Israel. Everybody should have the right to criticize Israel. And the notion that you should be kicked out of the country if you disagree with U.S. foreign policy. I'm sorry, Israel has gotten way too much of a goddamn free pass. And I'm not engaging in demagogy here, right? I am just telling you what needs to be said. This is what should be said. There are states in America where in order to work for the government of the state, in order to work for the government of the state of Georgia, you've got to sign a pledge not to boycott Israel. What the hell is that? In order to work for our country, you've got to pledge that you won't refuse to buy products from another country. That is insane. It'd be one thing if they said you can't boycott America to work in America, or you can't boycott Georgia to work in the state of Georgia. But to pledge that you won't boycott Israel, why in the world should anyone in America have their employment be dependent on them being loyal and not boycotting some foreign country? That is ridiculous. And that is absolutely ridiculous. And now they've got this policy that if you come to America as a student and you exercise your free speech and oppose Israel, they kick you out of the country. That is absolutely ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm opposed. And you know what? I thought Trump was the better candidate in the elections. I'm still hoping, fingers crossed, we can get peace with Russia. I'm glad they've changed a number of things. There were some good changes, but overall, not liking the bombing of Yemen, not liking the attacks on Yemen, not liking the attacks on free speech that are going on. I'm keeping it real with you all. And let me just say this, right? Let me just say this when we talk about the Israel issue. All right. And I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole, but I just want to throw this out there. Zionists still think they're being persecuted. All right. There's a guy who looks a lot like me. His face is very similar to mine. His name is Michael Rappaport. He's an actor, and people say I look like him. Michael Rappaport, if you watch his commentary, he still thinks he's oppressed. You're not allowed. You can't get a job in a number of states if you boycott a country he likes. People are getting literally kicked out of the country just for disagreeing with him. But somehow, people who support Israel, we're victims, we're oppressed. What the hell is, how is it? And this is Zionist. You want to talk about a victim complex? I have never seen a bigger victim complex. Wealthy, middle-class Zionists walk around thinking that they are the world's biggest victims. I do not understand it. What alternative reality do these people live in? You walk around certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn, you see very, very wealthy people who are very, very comfortable and very, very happy. And they've got a government that will literally kick you out of the country just for disagreeing with them. But somehow they're the most oppressed people that have ever existed. Now, there are a group of Zionist students that are suing Columbia University. This is beyond me, right? They're suing Columbia University because Columbia University allowed these protests to happen. Now, keep in mind, Columbia University expelled a huge amount of students for protesting in those, for being part of those protests, right? People were kicked out of Columbia University for saying from the river to the sea and all that. I guess that's not enough, right? The students that occupied the library were arrested. There was all kinds of repression against those students, but I guess it wasn't enough. And so now these students are suing Columbia University because other students protested and got arrested for it. And it's just like, my goodness, when I was in elementary school, I sat through so many religious rants from my professors, my teachers, my family. We were very liberal. My dad very strongly believed in Darwinian biology. My mother's very religious, but we were liberals, so to speak. And I sat through so many, you got to get saved, you got to come to Jesus speeches in elementary school. And, I didn't sue my school for that. And it's a public school. Religion is technically not allowed in public schools, but it was a small town and they just did that anyway. Whatever. When I got to high school, I sat through so many, you've got to support the war in Iraq. If you don't support the war in Iraq, you're a traitor. All these anti-war protesters are traitors to the country. I sat through that. And did I sue my school for that? No. This was the teachers. It wasn't other students. It was teachers. When I got to college, I sat through so many classes about how we have to overthrow the evil government in Russia. We got to overthrow the North Korean government. I had a professor in comparative politics, and she showed us 60 minutes, a 60 minutes hit piece on North Korea in the middle of the class. And I said, I'm sorry, but isn't this educational? I can watch 60 minutes at home. And she just really hated North Korea so much. And did I sue my college? No. But these Zionists, I guess they are just so triggered that anyone could disagree with them at Columbia University. Oh my God, other students disagreed with me and got kicked out of school for it and got arrested. My school owes me money. That is so goddamn ridiculous. I mean, you want to talk about entitlement. It's not enough that we give Israel billions and billions of dollars of our tax money. That's not enough. Not enough that we're literally kicking people out of the country just for disagreeing with Israel. It's not enough that you have to pledge not to boycott Israel. Now, if your college allows other students to go to the college and disagree with you, and even if those other students get arrested, and even if those other students get kicked out of the school, you're still a victim because they exist. Give me a break. That is so ridiculous. And I bet you still, those students, if they win their lawsuit and if they get a big chunk of money, in their minds, they're still the victims. They're still the victims somehow. I bet you they will still think they're victims, right? You know, I mean, it is beyond me. It is absolutely beyond me. It's absolutely beyond me. And I get frustrated about these things. And seeing Trump pander to this and go along with this, very, very disappointing. Very, very disappointing, I must say. I must say, Donald, the Israel first policies, the bombing of Yemen, the harassment of students, not thrilled. But do I have Trump derangement syndrome? No, because I know the mainstream hates Trump for bad reasons. The mainstream hates Trump because he doesn't want war with Russia. The mainstream hates Trump because he to some degree or other wanted to lift restrictions on free speech. I guess that doesn't apply to Israel. The Trump derangement syndrome movement is coming from a bad place. Okay, we can all agree that, right? It's complicated. And at the end of the day, it's not about what team we're on. It's not about the red team versus the blue team. It's about what we're for. And what we are for is a movement. We are for building an anti-imperialist movement. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. And what we need is a community of resistance that will stand up for working families, that will bring people together to carry out real operations, to educate and awaken and teach people anti-imperialist politics. And that is what we are building with the Center for Political Innovation. We are building a real anti-imperialist movement, and that is what we urgently need, right? And there is no substitute. There is absolutely no substitute. And if you run and join the blue team, you might as well run and join the red team, right? You're not doing your job. And if you engage in terrorism, and if you kill somebody, or you cheer for people that are burning Teslas, you're not helping. There's really only one solution. There's no shortcuts. There's no magic. There's no cheat code. There's only one solution, which is we need to build a mass movement against imperialism. We need to bring people together and organize. And that is why we are building for the biggest event that the Center for Political Innovation has ever done. We are going to have a mega anti-imperialist rally in Chicago on July 12th. This will be the biggest event the Center for Political Innovation has ever done. And we will never have done anything on this scale before. We are going to fill up an auditorium. It holds 500 people. We are going to fill that auditorium, 400 people minimum. We're going to fill this auditorium. I'm headed to Chicago very soon to get the ball rolling on the outreach, door hanger flyers, and all of that. It's very, very exciting. We are going to have a mega anti-imperialist rally with Garland Nixon, with Scott Ritter, with so many great guests and music, and it's going to be absolutely amazing. We need to give Chicago an event like they've never seen before and show that there's a real layer of people that are really anti-imperialist and really committed to this, and we are going to do it. And part of what we're doing, and I can't go into too much detail. If you go to my Twitter, you can see a video that explains this in detail. But there's a book that's been written about a certain country and about a certain organization in a certain country. This book needs to be more widely read. And I'm not going to tell you why, but this book needs to be much more widely studied and read. And if you know what I'm talking about, go watch my interview with Due Dissidents, go watch my interview with Kim Iverson. People need to read this book and know what's in it. They need to know what's going on in the country that we're bombing. They need to read this book, right? And I'm very proud of this book. This is probably the best book I've ever written. It's not very long. It's quite short, but it's good. And it has information. And if you read this book, you'll learn so much, not just about Yemen, but about movements and about anti-imperialism and about America and about our American spirit. This book is something I'm really, really proud of. So what we have done, I've already put the order in. There is a print shop. There is a print shop here in New York that is currently printing 1,000 copies of the book. Now, we want to do more than that, right? We're not going to stop at 1,000. I put the order in. We're trying to raise money to print this book in bulk, right? We've already put the order in. So what I would like is if you can help us out, right? We've already gotten some great contributions. Shout out to everyone. There's people I don't even know. There was somebody who gave us $300 last night. I have no idea who they are, and I appreciate it. I'm not going to say your name. I want to protect your privacy, but thank you. But there was somebody we don't even know gave us $300. There's people that are CPI members and others who've helped us out. And there's, great people. There was somebody who gave us $100 just now. Shout out to you. We appreciate it. And anyhow, what we're asking is that people help us make a contribution to help us print the book. Make a contribution to help us print the book. That's what we're asking for. Donate to the book on GoFundMe. We're asking that people help do that. And a lot of people have stepped up to the plate, actually. I am very happy. The total cost of printing these books is a lot, okay? But we're doing it, and I'm headed to the printer next week. They're already churning them out. And we're going to be printing a new edition of the book, a couple corrections, but on the back, we're going to have the poster for our convention that we're doing. And we are going to get these books all over the Chicago area at pro-Palestine events, at mosques, at universities. We're going to distribute this book and tell the American people about this group that we are bombing. We are going to get this book into thousands of people's hands. We're going to do it. And it's already started. The process has already started. If you can help us out, that would be great. Now, if you want to help us out in a different way, you want to be a little bit more anonymous, Cash App me. Right? You can donate to me on Cash App, Caleb Maupin 22, right? If you don't want your name linked to this, I can understand having a little bit of anxiety. Cash App, just Caleb Maupin 22, just Cash App donation. No questions asked. Your privacy is safer that way. You're not linked to the project, right? You could just be sending me money for any reason. But if you want to help us out, we are in the process of, these books are already at the printers. They're already at the printers. We have got to build an anti-imperialist movement. We have got to build an anti-imperialist movement, not a communist movement, not a Luigi Mangione movement, not a Tesla burning movement, but an anti-imperialist movement that is based on love of our communities, love of our country, love of the human spirit of innovation and growth. That is what we need to build. We have got to build a movement. We have got to build a movement. There is no substitute. We urgently need a movement. We need a movement in this country right now. We need the community that we are building that bonds people together, that helps people learn to trust each other, that does outreach and puts those flyers on the doors and builds those big events and has the classes and the seminars to teach people these ideas. The movement that was at Donald Trump's inauguration, we were there with a huge banner that said, "Only peace can make America great again." It was absolutely beautiful what we did at Trump's inauguration. The movement that was there at Madison Square Garden, outside of Donald Trump's big rally, "Only peace can make America great again." The movement that published a book about Kamala Harris that was so explosive in exposing who she really was that it was banned from Amazon, so we distributed thousands of copies at the Democrat convention. The movement that stood with the Uhuru Three when they were indicted, and we were at every court date and every hearing, and we were the best supporters that the Uhuru Three ever had, and we stood with the Uhuru movement. That's the movement this country needs. That's the movement this country needs. Forget the demagogues, forget the haters, forget the people that are posing on social media and going to different corners of the world to take selfies. We need a movement, and we're building that movement. And it's not easy, and there's no shortcuts, but we're building that movement, and we need your support. So if you can give us a donation to print this book, that would be very, very much appreciated. Here is the link. Here is the link. Please help us with that. So, folks, it's been a wild ride. It's been a wild ride, but, I'm glad to be here. The interview that we did, well, anyway, let's do the roll call, and I'll update you all on a few other things. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations, names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Bob in Troy, New York is with us. Bob in Troy, New York. Ryan in Kansas City. Jenny in Cincinnati is with us. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. John McCarthy in Chicago. Courtney in Northern Virginia. Jacob in Wisconsin. Dan in the LA area. Chris in Kew Gardens, New York. Auckland, New Zealand. Philip Sang in Miami, Florida. Zach on the Oregon coast. Denver in Minnesota. Ian in Chester, England. Tom in St. Louis. April and Chris in Salt Lake City. Ty McCullough Wise in the Midwest. Yemen. Colin in Greensboro. Michigan here. Alyssa in Virginia. Deha in Seattle. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Houston. Jared. Shout out to the Apache in Yemen. All right. Very good. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Anybody else with us here tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. So let me remind you all. All right. Very, very good. Very, very good. That's the way to send your questions. Rumble rant. I see we've got one from Jacob about Trotsky. We'll do that. And Caleb Moffat 22. We got Boris in Gary, Indiana. Welcome, Boris. Good to meet you. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. We got Kiwi Corner in Auckland, New Zealand. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Is anybody else with us tonight? Has anybody here seen Callie? Kelly. Has anybody here seen Callie? We know him by his smile. His hair is red and his eyes are blue. He is Irish through and through. Has anybody here seen Callie? Callie from the Emerald Isle. That is not actually an Irish song, mind you. That song was originally an English song, and it was about Kelly from the Isle of Man. And it was made popular by in America by a Jewish woman who was a nightclub vaudeville singer, and she sang it. And then they rewrote it. They realized that there were a lot more Irish Americans who would go to the vaudeville clubs. It was urban and it was much more working class. And so they rewrote it. Instead of Kelly from the Isle of Man, it became Kelly from the Emerald Isle. And, and I believe the lyrics were, I think the lyrics were originally, he's bad as old Antonio. He left me on my Onio. And then they changed it to his hair is red, his eyes are blue. He is Irish through and through. But yeah, and it's funny because that song is associated with Irish Americans. It is not an Irish song in any conceivable way. It's an English song that was made popular in America. So yeah, and it's certainly, I mean, of all the Irish songs out there, there's nothing about the Irish freedom struggle or anything. And it's actually kind of like, if you look at the lyrics that were generally sung with it, it's kind of making fun of Irish people, right? There's, I don't know. But anyway, you can look at the lyrics. There's like a whole thing about like she lost her boyfriend in New York City and it happens to be St. Patrick's Day. And I don't know. You look at it, it's a little bit of a silly song. Has anybody here seen Callie? Kelly. Has anybody here seen Callie? You'll know him by his smile. His hair is red and his eyes are blue. He is Irish through and through. Has anybody here seen Callie? Callie from the Emerald Isle. Anyway, not an Irish song, but it's in the movie Catch Me If You Can, which is a movie with Chevy Chase. No, not Chevy Chase. I'm sorry. It's a movie with Charlie Sheen and Leonardo DiCaprio. It's about like a con artist, a famous con artist who eventually became like an FBI. I don't know. Anyway, it's been a long time. Anyway. So we only have one super chat. It's not a super chat. We only have one Rumble rant that has come in, and a temp car is asking about Trotsky, and I will answer that. But if you all can send, super chat, Cash App, you can also send contributions for the book via Cash App, or you can, you can Rumble Rant. That would be good. Give me something to talk about. Give me something to talk about, right? Give me something to talk about. That would be a helpful thing. There's a song I'm going to play, obviously. You all were just subjected to my singing. I am not a very good singer, but you all were just subjected to my singing, and I appreciate that. I hope that you appreciated it. But no, I'm actually going to play some like professional music here in a second. Hold on. I just I'm going to play some professional music here. There's a song, an old English song that I've been enjoying lately. It's very old, and it's called High Germany. And I really like it. It is like the husband has been drafted to fight in a war. And he wants his wife, who is pregnant, to come with him. And she's saying, "No, I will not come with you." And it's actually, it's quite good. It's it's got kind of a heavy rhythm to it. So I'm gonna find a version of High Germany that I can play on here, the old English song. But basically, yeah, he's been drafted to go to northern Germany to fight in a war. He doesn't, obviously, he wants to take his wife with him, who's pregnant, and she is saying that she can't do it. So let me find a version I can get away with playing on here. I have to find a version that's not, that it's not going to get me get me in trouble, but let me find a version of, oh yeah, right. Let me just find, oh, nope. Oh, just looking for a version of High Germany, the song High Germany, that I can play on here. By High Germany, they mean northern Germany. They don't mean intoxicated Germany, right? That would be quite a war in intoxicated Germany, but it's okay. All right. So here's a guy playing it on his YouTube channel on his guitar. I think we can probably get away with playing this version. So yeah, just let me pull it up. But yeah, it's a favorite of mine. It's become a favorite. I discovered it a few years ago, an old English song, and I particularly like it. So we're gonna play High Germany on this channel. Here we go. All right. This is a guy playing it. All right, here we go. All right. There we go. All right, here we go.
Oh, Polly, love, oh, Polly, the rout is now begun, and we must go a march and to the beating of the drum. Go dress yourself in all your best and come along with me. I'll take you to the war, my love, in High Germany. Oh, Willie, love, oh, Willie, come list what I do say. My feet, they are so tender, I cannot march away. And besides, my dearest Willie, I am a child by thee, not fitted for the war, my love, in High Germany. I'll buy for you a horse, my love, and on it you shall ride. And all my delight shall be in a riding by your side. We'll stop at every ale house and drink when we are dry. We'll be true to one another, get married by and by. Oh, cursed be them cruel wars, lest ever they should rise. And out of a merry England press many a man likewise. They press my true love from me, likewise my brothers three, and sent them to the war, my love, in High Germany. foes I do not fear. But since my true love left me, I wander far and near. And when my baby it is born, a smiling on my knee, I'll think on lovely Willie in high Germany. Oh Polly, love, oh Polly, the rout is now begun, and we must go a march and to the beating of the drum. Go dress yourself in all your best and come along with me. I'll take you to the war, my love, in high Germany.
There we go. There we go. That's some good stuff. So we got one question that's come in. It's from Hempcar. Was Trotsky funded by some billionaire? Was he an infiltrator of communism? Are there any good documentaries on this era? Hempcar, there's so much to that we need to get into. So what we need to first point out is that divisions in the ruling class are one of the main ways revolutionary organizations have been able to seize power historically. Lenin would never have been able to return to Russia if the German government had not funded him, right? Lenin was a Russian, but he was in exile, right? He was driven out of the country for advocating a revolution, and he was living in Switzerland, and Switzerland was neutral in World War I, and Lenin was living in Switzerland, and German intelligence came to his house and said, hey, we'll send you back to Russia if you can build a revolutionary movement that'll hurt Russia because they're our enemy in the war. And Lenin got support from the Germans to come back to Russia. And that's not disputed. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, he wanted to get Russia out of World War I. He wanted to build a revolutionary movement. So, the Germans boosted him. Roosevelt was, aligned with the Rockefellers, etc., but he aligned himself with the labor movement. And the height of the Communist Party's influence in America was when they were aligned with Roosevelt, because Roosevelt was anti-fascist. So entering an alliance with the ruling class is not in and of itself a bad thing. The other thing you have to remember, and I talked about the German intelligence, right, is that it wasn't just the German intelligence helping Lenin. There was all kinds of intelligence manipulation of all these revolutionary groups in the 1800s. The British were funding all kinds of groups on the European mainland. There were all kinds of groups that were being backed and supported by different governments, and that, in the lead up to World War I, especially, all kinds of infiltration was going on, and that these revolutionary groups, anarchists that engaged in assassinations and all kinds of revolutionary groups were being manipulated. So that said, Leon Trotsky, his personal mentor was Alexander Parvus. Now, Alexander Parvus was a guy who was born in Russia, but moved to Germany, became a German citizen, and was eventually elected to the German parliament. And Alexander Parvus was a Marxist, but he eventually became a German intelligence officer and an arms dealer. He was the main weapons dealer for Turkey. Turkey was an ally of Germany in World War I. And Alexander Parvus, he was an elected member of the German parliament who was a Marxist from the Social Democratic Party. And he was an arms dealer for the Turkish government. And Alexander Parvus, if you read about him, he was Trotsky's personal mentor, and he taught Trotsky the theory of permanent revolution. And Alexander Parvus was a German intelligence officer. So, he was involved in the German secret police. And it was Alexander Parvus who eventually got Lenin to go back to Russia. Now, Lenin and Trotsky did not reconcile until July of 1917. So they were not even together at that point. And Alexander Parvus didn't agree with Lenin because he supported World War I. But Lenin was against World War I. But for German intelligence reasons, Alexander Parvus maneuvered and arranged for Lenin to return to Russia. Trotsky, I would argue, was this well-known socialist speaker and writer. And I believe he was probably boosted and promoted by various people for various different reasons throughout the time. At the time the Russian Revolution happened, Trotsky was well known outside of Russia. The Bolsheviks were not. And I remember reading old newspapers in America. They blamed, they blamed the Russian Revolution on Trotsky because no one had ever heard of the Bolsheviks. And it wasn't until, it wasn't after a while and they finally heard of the Bolsheviks that they started blaming it on the Bolsheviks. But Trotsky was this well-known Russian guy, and he'd lived in London and he'd lived in Vienna, and he was living in New York City at the time of the Russian Revolution. He had a Russian language newspaper called Novy Mir, which means new peace. My Russian audience, people who speak Russian, I apologize, I'm probably butchering that, but Novy Mir, or Novi Mir or whatever. I don't know how to say it. I don't speak Russian, but I mean, New World or New Peace. And it was a newspaper for Russian speakers living in Brooklyn in New York City, Brooklyn and the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Trotsky apparently lived on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and he wouldn't tip in restaurants because he insisted that waiters should form a union and they shouldn't need a tip. And so he was quite rude. He would go to restaurants, and when they would bring him the bill, he would refuse to tip, and he would give them a speech about how they should form a union. Not a nice guy. But Trotsky was just this wealthy writer. I mean, he was like a Noam Chomsky or something like that. This well-known writer and speaker who was a socialist, who was from Russia, who was living in other countries. And when the Russian Revolution, the February Revolution, happened, he was living in New York City, and he went back to Russia. And Lenin was living in Switzerland, and Lenin went back to Russia. Lenin arrived in April of 1917 to give his April thesis and to dramatically change the Bolshevik Party and how they operated so they could take power. And then in July of 1917, Trotsky joined the Bolsheviks. So, and then Trotsky, he had his theory of permanent revolution, which the Bolsheviks refused to adopt. And after Lenin's death, he had a falling out with Stalin, and he left the USSR. He lived in Turkey, and then he lived in France, and then he lived in Mexico, and then he was assassinated and killed in Mexico. Trotsky, I mean, I don't know what you want to say about him. He was a middle-class revolutionary, and he didn't really like Russia. He really loved the Western intelligentsia. He really loved the Western movements. And yeah, he was supported by various people. One of his primary disagreements with Lenin prior to World War I, prior to the Russian Revolution, was that Trotsky was going around everywhere calling for the creation of a United States of Europe. And he said that if all the European countries were to merge into one country, that would divide, it would get rid of the national divisions between the Germans and the French and the Italians and the Spaniards, and it would create solidarity among the workers. Lenin said, no, a United States of Europe would be a bad thing, because a United States of Europe would strengthen imperialism, and those colonial powers, those colonizers, would be more strengthened in their ability to exploit the third world. So we want to encourage division between the Germans and the French and the Italians and the British, right? We don't want to bring them together. And that disagreement pointed to a solid disagreement. Trotsky, his theory of permanent revolution, said only in the West, only in the Western capitalist countries can you have a socialist revolution that really means anything. Right? That in the colonized world, you can have revolutions, but they only really exist as temporary holdouts to spread communism to the West, because the West is all that matters. Whereas Lenin said the revolutionary energy would be in the East. And because of imperialism, the working class in the Western countries was stratifying. It was dividing. And because of that, the revolutionary energy would be in the East. It would be in the colonized countries. So that was a fundamental difference that they had, and but that raises questions. Germany, right? Parvus was the guy who advised Trotsky, was his personal mentor, and was also a German intelligence officer. Parvus is the guy who came up with this, with this theory of permanent revolution that is the basis for Trotsky's beliefs. And Parvus, being a German intelligence officer, it looks like he was saying things that were to the benefit of German imperialism. And it makes sense that Trotsky would go around advocating a United States of Europe, because that would benefit German imperialism. Germany was trying to take control of the mainland. So that we don't really know, right? And there's a lot of people that point out that Trotsky's visa, was approved. I mean, he was, he got special, he was brought to the United States. You couldn't just come to the United States, but somehow he was enabled to come to the United States. There was somebody in the deep state that enabled him to come to New York City and set up shop in New York City and run his Russian language newspaper. So you have to understand, just like back then, and even up to today, all these groups are infiltrated. And there's a big chess game that goes on between the intelligence agencies and all of that. And at that time, German imperialism was at odds with British and French and American imperialism. And there were a lot of revolutionary groups, anarchists, communists, nationalists of various stripes. And, there was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. That's the event that started World War I. Well, that was done by a revolutionary Serbian group, the Black Hand, right? And they were a Serbian nationalist revolutionary group that was probably being supported by some government. And that's why it led to World War I breaking out. So it's complicated. And just, it's like, was he an agent? No, there's manipulation of all these different groups, right? Trotsky, I'm very critical of. I think he represents the worst, honestly. He represents that middle-class strata, and that Leninism was a solid break with social democracy. Trotsky always wanted to have one foot in European social democracy and et cetera. He wasn't really anti-imperialist is what it really got down to. But was he boosted? And after he fled the Soviet Union, he was absolutely being promoted by all kinds of anti-communists. They were promoting him like crazy. And especially when the Popular Front started, when the Communist Party was aligned with Roosevelt against fascism. At that point, it looks like Trotsky was being boosted and promoted by fascists to try and, divide the United Front. And in Spain, during the Spanish Civil War, that's where the term fifth column comes from, right? Have you ever heard the term fifth column? It was when Francisco Franco, the fascist, was fighting against the city of Barcelona. He famously said, I have 4 columns outside the city, but I have a 5th column inside the city. He was referring to the Trotskyites in the city that were trying to undermine the united front against fascism that the communists were creating. And Trotsky and Trotskyists, they were actively trying to prevent a united front against fascism from being created. And George Orwell, right? He wrote a whole book, Homage to Catalonia, all about how, the Communist Party was holding back a genuine workers' revolution. And George Orwell, who ended up being the anti-communist novelist, he's the guy who, he went and fought in Spain with the Trotskyist group, POUM, the Workers' Party of Spain, the POUM, I believe it's called the Workers' Party or whatever. It was a Trotskyite group that was organizing strikes and uprisings to destabilize the Spanish Republic and weaken the fight against fascism. So all of this is complicated. And, so yes, was Trotsky being manipulated and used by intelligence agencies? Absolutely. Whereas the communists, the communist parties, they were serving the Soviet Union, right? They wanted to advance. They openly were aligned with the Soviet Union and were serving its foreign policy goals. And during the late 1930s, when the USA was run by Roosevelt and the USA was entering an alliance with the Soviet Union, with the British, they were serving American foreign policy goals. Trotsky, on the other hand, was trying to undermine that alliance. So it's very likely he received German support, for that, but all of these things are complicated, that there are different powerful forces battling against each other. And that you gotta get beyond this, was so-and-so an infiltrator, was so-and-so an agent. It's more complicated than that. You have to understand there are competing factions within the intelligence apparatus, within the deep state. There are competing imperialist powers. There are alliances. There are divisions within the ruling class. And that, yes, all politics, the way that organizations flourish and exist is they're aligned with somebody and they're working, they have allies who enable them to flourish and grow. And I would encourage you to read my book, and there's an audio book of it, thanks to Tyler. Where is America going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. Read that book, read the section on gangs and counter gangs and revolutionaries, and I get into all of this. It's much more complicated. I hope that this is helpful, Hempcar. I hope that I'm giving you some new insights. Seems your analysis of Trump before the election was not really based on a Marxist point of view of the guy, since you've seen a real estate businessman so far would have been able to do anything for the world. What are you getting at? My understanding of Trump is that Trump represents one faction within the ruling class that is pro-economic growth, lower level capitalists that are not part of the club that want growth, right? And that there is a division between the ultra rich and the lower levels of capital. And the reason Trump is deregulating everything, and he's got Elon Musk taking apart the federal government, is because they believe the federal government will rig things for the ultra rich. Look, I am not. Kamali is the person who asked that question, right? Like there's so much wrong with what you're saying there. I don't know where to begin with it. So first of all, you're saying that I wouldn't have been a Marxist because Trump is a real estate businessman. Like, did I ever say Trump was a Marxist? I mean, no, I said Trump was the lesser of two evils. Trump was the candidate who was appealing to anti-war sentiments. Trump was the candidate who was appealing to anti-establishment sentiments. Like, did at any point I say Trump was not a businessman? Did at any point did I say Trump was wealthy? Did at any point did I say Trump was not part of the capitalist class? Was not, it's like there's so much wrong there. I don't know where to begin. No, I said that Trump represents one faction of the ruling class that has slightly different agenda and interests than another, and that he's appealing to people's anti-war desires. That's all I said. And, he may make peace in Russia. And look, peace with Russia. This was a conversation, some of us had earlier today. If we just completely throw in the towel and give up on peace with Russia because Trump has let us down in so many other ways, we're not doing our duty, right? Peace with Russia and improving of U.S. relations with Russia, improving business relations with Russia can lead to better things, right? Right now, Trump is doing awful stuff when it comes to the Middle East, with Yemen, with Israel, Palestine. But that said, if Russia, which is a friend of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is opposed to his moves on the Middle East, which has been opposing Israel at the Security Council, if Russia can become more involved in the U.S. economy, U.S. society can change. Russia is a really good friend of North Korea. Russia is a really good friend of Iran. And, if we make peace with Russia, that could be a stepping stone to things starting to improve in a number of different ways. So I'm not ready to give up on peace with Russia. The negotiations happening right now are really important. And if U.S.-Russia relations can be restored, and if the Ukraine war can be ended, that could possibly lead to things moving in a better direction. It's not about good guys and bad guys. It's about the balance of forces. And there's a new economy that's rising in the world right now, centered around Russia and China. That's the future. And there's the dying Western imperialist system. And that is the past. And we need to get America as tied in with the future as possible. And ultimately, it is in the economic interest of the American working people, of even many of the American capitalists, to defeat globalism, imperialism, the dying world order that comes out of colonialism, etc. And if we can improve U.S.-Russia relations, if the USA and Russia can start getting along, if the Russian economy gets more integrated into the U.S. economy, that can lead to sections of U.S. society that are tied in with this new economy getting bigger and getting more influential. And Russia is also friends with Iran. Russia is also friends with China. Russia's friends with North Korea. And that could be a step, right? You have to not think about this in terms of good guys and bad guys. You have to think about it in terms of what are the balance of forces. Right now, there's one potentially really, really good thing that Donald Trump appears to be working on. And if we just throw in the towel, and if we just say, nope, we're going to join the liberals, fuck Trump, we do that and we give up on that, we're not doing our job. Our job is to oppose imperialism and to build a movement of Americans that oppose imperialism. That's our job. And we have to do that. And being loud, outspoken supporters of the peace process for Ukraine, that is something that we must do. That is something that we must do. I don't want to be loud and right on the internet. I want to build the movement that can actually change the world. Look, I am so angry at communists right now. I am really, I got to tell you something. I have spent my whole life as an anti-imperialist, my whole life doing anti-imperialist work. And no one is more hated among communists than I am. Right? I have done more for the causes that communists supposedly believe in than anybody, and communists hate my guts. And that right there tells you, that there's a really, really big problem, right? My record as an anti-imperialist is a mile long. It's a mile long. And, and you would think that people might say, well, you know what? I don't agree with this thing that Caleb does or that thing that Caleb does, but, he's done a lot for anti-imperialism. That is not what communists say. Communists hate me more than anybody because it's a competition, because they want to be right. Look, I made this video a few years ago called Why Does the Synthetic Left Hate Caleb Mop? And I see there's another Rumble rant that's come in. If you want to send a question, send super chats via Rumble rants. You can ask questions via Rumble rants, or you can cash at me, Caleb Moppin 22. I'm going to put this video on. It's just a video I made, just kind of showing some of the stuff I've done over the years. And I'll keep answering questions as they come in. So here we go.
Anti-war groups are getting ready to stage protests in Times Square today. Rosa Flores joining me live now from New York. So Rosa, tell us more about the protests unfolding there in New York.
Yeah, well, those protesters are making their way here to Times Square, and I'm actually here with one of the organizers, Caleb from the International Action Center. And I know that you guys are expecting dozens, if not hundreds, of people here. But first of all, explain to us kind of what is your mission? Why are you guys here?
The last thing we need right now is a new war against Syria. Right now, they're cutting food stamps, hospitals are closing, schools are being shut down. I'll tell you this, and I don't tell this to you as an American.
Eu vou contar uma coisa para vocês, e não enquanto americano,
I tell you this as somebody looking at the world economy,
mas como alguém que observa a economia mundial,
looking at what these oil bankers have done to the world,
e observa o que os banqueiros do petróleo fizeram com o mundo.
And I've got to give you some advice.
E eu preciso dar um conselho para vocês.
I've got to humbly urge you.
Eu humildemente peço
Don't give up Petrobras.
Que vocês não desistam da Petrobras.
Don't let Rockefeller, Carnegie, DuPont, and Rothschild come into Brazil.
So tell people what BreadTube is, and then tell people how they serve imperialism.
Internet subculture, this internet universe that presents itself as left-wing, that presents itself as socialist or Marxist or anarchist, but is really just a way to rile up young people who associate with progressive causes, anti-racism, workers' rights, and get them supporting the U.S. political establishment against the right wing. And so the more I kind of observe this internet subculture, these people are getting hundreds of thousands, millions of views. They're being promoted by the New Yorker magazine, and they're speaking in the name of Marxism and socialism and leftism. But the essence of what they say is that the United States and U.S. imperialism, they are the good guys against, these authoritarian regimes around the world. They're spreading freedom.
It is really an honor tonight to bring forward our guest of honor, a real hero, someone who deserves to be heard from the heavens. Everyone should hear what this man has to say. Scott Ritter is here. Scott Ritter is here. We are proud that Scott Ritter is here. This is a hero. This is a hero right here. We love you, Scott. We love you. Go ahead and give us some words.
Thank you very much.
People in the United States are suffering. Our water's not being purified. Our railroads are falling apart. Our power grids are falling apart. And yet we pour more and more weapons and money into some stupid confrontation with China. China is not our enemy. 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 Get out of our country. Stop trying to sell war in our country. Stop trying to sell war in our country. We don't want a new war with China. We love America and we don't want a new war with China. China is not not our enemy.
I don't believe what's coming out about this chemical weapons attack. I have a lot of questions about it. There are a lot of facts that just aren't adding up. And we've heard about weapons of mass destruction before. There's so many lies to take us into war. We don't need a new war. We need jobs, schools, education, and not a new war against the Syrian people. And these rebels that our government and our tax dollars are paying for, they're not good folks, and they're doing awful things there in Syria, and we should not be supporting these rebels in Syria.
It's pretty clear that they are getting propped up by one wing of the establishment. Now, in the book, I go into the evidence of that, but then we have further evidence of that thanks to the work of Max Blumenthal and the Gray Zone. We now know that one of these voices, Abigail Thorne, was directly being subsidized by the British government, by foundations tied to USAID and to the British royal family and such. So, you know, what I said in the book, based on estimates, right, based on some of the people in the background advising them that I heard about, other things, has now been pretty well confirmed. These folks are basically some kind of psyop to get young people that have socialistic or anti-imperialist instincts and get them to serve the empire.
So you're saying, and you're saying there's evidence to back this up, that there are YouTubers in the political lefty space, and a lot of them. You're saying a lot, not just, but a lot of them, and they're called BreadTube, and you're saying that those people are somehow being co-opted by the intelligence communities to push an agenda?
Sure. I mean, I received quite a bit of information about who was advising them. There's an individual who's tied to military psychiatrists who appeared on CNN calling for mass deprogramming of the country after January 6th. And there are other things that point to some kind of covert support, the mainstream media highlighting some of these people and celebrating them. And then their foreign policy stances could come directly from CNN. And then we have that great report that was done by the Gray Zone. And
FBI, Fred Hampton in his bed was being gunned down. In the DPRK, they welcomed a delegation from the Black Panther Party and said, "We love the Black Panthers. They're fighting for national liberation." They loved the Black Panther Party while this government murdered the Black Panthers. So we took inspiration from Kim Il-sung, from Marx, from Lenin, from all the people struggling against imperialism. Basic things. People have the right to a job. They have the right to education. But this system spends money on war, on murder, on killing. And
U.S. out! 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 U.S.
Red Dawn is a lying war propaganda film.
This is a lying war propaganda film.
Korea wants peace.
Korea wants peace.
I spent 13 days on a ship chartered by the Red Crescent Society of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The ship was called the Iran Shahid, and it was loaded with over 2,500 tons of humanitarian aid for the people of Yemen. The boat had nothing on it but medical supplies, flour, canned food, and water. All of them were volunteers from the Red Crescent Society of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they wanted to get to Yemen, a war-torn country on the Arabian Peninsula, and help the people in need. We departed from Bandar Abbas, a port city in southern Iran. The day we were scheduled to arrive, they bombed the port of Hodeidah 8 times in a single day. 8 times to prevent us from delivering medical aid. And we were unable to complete our mission. We were forced to go to Djibouti. And blocking humanitarian aid is a crime against humanity. It is illegal to block humanitarian aid. And we were completely open to having the ship inspected.
We are proud to have guests from that organization here today to show that we are not afraid, we are not intimidated, and that we offer nothing but unequivocal full support and solidarity to them while they're under attack. Please stand up, comrades. Come on the stage, please.
Fist up! Fist up! Fist up! Fist up! Fist up!
Though Martin Luther King Jr. was shot down and killed for his brave, dedicated work, after his death, he has been reduced to a harmless patriotic icon. School children throughout the United States are now taught that MLK is proof that the United States is, quote, the greatest nation in the world. I say you're not a revolutionary unless you recognize that black people constitute a nation, and that as a nation they have the right to self-determination, to choose separation or integration for themselves. But the United States is far bigger than that. In In the heartland of the United States, what Sarah Palin demagogically called the real America, there are millions of young people who are very unhappy. The U.S. economy has been wrecked by deindustrialization. The steel mills, auto plants, and other good-paying industrial jobs have been eliminated.
First commune was being smashed. They were lining up all of the communards and executing them one by one and then dumping their bodies into shallow graves. Among the communards, there were some of them that had the idea to do this as they were being shot. So they'd stand there and put their fists like this. And then their body would be dumped into shallow graves. And then rigorous mortima would take effect. And those who had shot them looked on in horror as the fists came up out of the ground. That's what the fist stands for. That's the origin of that salute. I say now is the time not to fight to make America great again. Now is the time to fight for American rebirth. American rebirth! American rebirth! American rebirth! American rebirth! American rebirth!
Russia was with us in the fight against the Nazis in World War II. At the moments when America shows its true colors and is standing up for justice and truth, you'll notice that we're standing with Russia. We need a program that says equal rights for immigrant workers. We need a program that says end police brutality. We need a program that says stop the cuts in food stamps. We need a program that says hands off our schools and universities. We need a program that includes health care for all, jobs for all, education for all.
They're about to arrest! They're about to arrest! The people in the Bank of America! The people in the Bank of America! What are we gonna do about it? What are we gonna do about it?
Shame! 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 Shame!
It's not about Democrat versus Republican. It's not about a liberal program or a conservative program. It's about the banker program versus the people's program. That's what's going on.
I want to present to you the International Solidarity and Truth Award. This is the Center for Political Innovations Award that we are giving to Tara Reid for actions in defense of international truth and solidarity in the pursuit of peace and justice. This is
Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy.
Hoy ya en Estados Unidos hubo la primera marcha, la primera movilización en Nueva York. Allá se movilizaron los movimientos sociales.
Speaking on behalf of the Center for Political Innovation, I was sent here on behalf of Caleb Maupin.
One point must also be made on behalf of the board of directors, and this is that Caleb Maupin is our ideological leader. CPI is the result of Caleb Maupin's vision for building an organization, and we recognize his unique approach to building 21st century socialism.
Last year, in a particularly cold winter, we saw the power grid here in Texas collapse, leaving all kinds of working families out in the cold. We love America, but Wall Street does not love America.
China, peace with Russia, peace with 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 China. Peace with Russia, peace with China.
I would say
All right, everybody. Glad you're still here. Yeah. So anyhow, there's a couple more questions that have come in. But please do help us print the Yemen book. We're calling it the Yemen book, just being safe here to avoid censorship. Please do help us on the GoFundMe. Let's try to get as many copies of this book out there as we can. It's at the printer right now, but we need your help to print it. You can Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22, also as a way to do it. We got 2 more Rumble rants that have come in. Hempcar says, is Trump's desire to take Canada and Greenland and Panama or rejoin the Commonwealth a sign of the West scrambling for power? Well, the Commonwealth thing is a disaster. I don't know why that's even being floated. That is some weird shit. I really don't like that. The other thing about Canada and Greenland, again, I'm happy to see Trump fighting with other imperialist countries. Now, today, the Russian president talked about how the Greenland thing is really not appreciated, how Russia, that the Arctic, moving in on the Arctic is certainly a threat to global peace. The Panama thing is certainly not a good thing either. A threat on the sovereignty of the people of Panama. I mean, it's a lot of chest pounding, I guess, at the end of the day. But there is a section of the American deep state that's favored annexing Canada for quite some time. And that is possibly related to pivoting eastward, Alaska, and the Bering Sea. So that, that has a positive side to it. The people in the eastern parts of Canada and people in Ontario don't want to be part of the United States, but the people in the western parts that are not very highly populated, those folks they are pretty conservative. And there was the trucker convoy. Those folks, a lot of them do want to be part of the United States. So that one's a little bit more complicated, but yeah, the Commonwealth thing is unbelievably bad. But again, there you go. And then, have you seen this woke right psyop used by neocons on the right, like James Lindsay and Konstantin Kisin, to smear anti-war right like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson? They want to split the right. Well, I mean, Tucker Carlson continues to do great stuff. I mean, he had Rick Sanchez on his show recently to talk about why RT should be brought back. That was great. Candace Owens, she's really very much not drunk the Israel Kool-Aid. And she has, challenged Israel. And that is very admirable. And she's supporting Mahmoud Khalil. And she's opposing the bombing of Yemen. And, so Candace Owens, I'm impressed with. Now, when it comes to, there's always been neocons on the right. I would say the majority of right-wing voices are, these guys that you're mentioning, I don't know their work in particular, but they're not the exception. I would say the majority of Republicans in Congress, the majority of conservatives think the way they think, right? It's the anti-war conservatives that have been the new, Thomas Massey, people like that. They kind of represent a divergent view among conservatives. But yeah, neoconservatism has really dominated American conservatism since the 1960s, since the downfall of McCarthyism. They say the big turning point was when the Conservative Political Action Conference banned the John Birch Society. The John Birch Society was a kind of a conservative movement that I talk about in a lot of my work because they were an anti-establishment right-wing movement, right? U.S. imperialism kind of moved in a liberal direction during the late 50s and early 60s to counter McCarthyism. And there was a number of people on the right that kind of, in their conservatism, it put them at odds with the American imperialist state. And that's worth studying, right? And that it was based on their material interests. Basically, the John Birch Society, people like that, they thought that communism was a Wall Street conspiracy. And they were wrong about that. But why did they think that? They thought it because the Rockefellers and the degrowth-oriented capitalists had kind of entered a strategic alliance with the communists against the industrialists, and against the factory owners. And that the Rockefellers, they funded a lot of peace activism. They were supporters of the civil rights movement. And they were at odds with the military-industrial complex and the factory owners that hated labor unions and were very conservative. And so, that Eastern establishment, the Rockefeller Republicans or whatever you want to call it, that were not the hard right, They very much are Malthusian and degrowth oriented. That's why the Rockefeller family, they funded the research of Alfred Kinsey. That's why they promoted the Birth Control League and Margaret Sanger. They're Malthusians, if there ever were such a thing. So, and I've written a lot about the divisions in the ruling class. But yeah, really, since the rise of the neocons and the end of the John Birch Society, 1964, Barry Goldwater lost epically to Lyndon Johnson. John F. Kennedy was killed. Lyndon Johnson was the vice president, and he ran against Barry Goldwater. And Barry Goldwater was the Republican candidate. And Barry Goldwater went down in flames because he was associated with the far right. He was associated with an anti-establishment right wing, with the John Birch Society, etc. So yeah, there you go. Yeah. So yeah, I like the anti-war right wing, but they're a minority, at least among elected officials and conservative outlets, etc. They are certainly a minority. But they're an exciting minority, and it really, wokeism has become kind of the religion of Western imperialism. But when it really gets down to it, the synthetic left and the neoconservative right, they believe the same thing, which is anti-humanism, philosophical irrationalism, the belief that some people are just naturally better than others, the belief that the masses of people are the rabble, and the belief that communism and fascism are the same thing and they both represent excessive democracy. Which is crazy, right? Because communism and fascism are generally denounced for not being democratic enough. But if you listen to what Leo Strauss says, if you listen to what Irving Kristol says, and if you listen to what Susan Sontag says and others, they view fascism and communism not only as the same, but as the result of excessive democratic participation. The masses of the people deep down are a bunch of authoritarians who suppress and persecute the great intellectuals. That is what they believe. And because they believe that, they are afraid of the masses of people. They're anti-populist. And, there's a great book called The Destruction of Reason by George Lukács that takes apart Friedrich Nietzsche and sees the roots of the Nazi regime and its crimes as in the teachings and the colonialist view of Friedrich Nietzsche. And I've talked about philosophical irrationalism. The belief that there is no truth, there is no right and wrong, and that any attempt to impose or stick up for truth is totalitarian, and that the only good comes from deconstruction. These are the concepts put forward first by Friedrich Nietzsche, but now, Ayn Rand is on the right, and she promotes this kind of stuff. She's somebody who's popular on the American right, but it's very popular. It's called postmodernism among the left, right? The idea of celebrating deconstruction, opposing all grand narratives, philosophical irrationalism is the ideology of dying imperialism. And the woke synthetic left and the neocon right wing are both expressions of philosophical irrationalism. The future is illiberal. And this is why I give Alexander Dugin credit. Alexander Dugin has his book on the fourth political theory. He recognized that illiberalism is the future, but, there used to be, different, there was fascism, there was communism. It's not that simple. There are various forms and incarnations of illiberalism around the world. And the anti-imperialist forces in the world are illiberal. They are conservative in a lot of ways, traditional, nationalistic, but they're also socialistic in a lot of ways. They're anti-colonial. They have leftist and rightist elements to them. But largely, illiberalism is the opposition to liberalism, and liberalism is an expression of philosophical irrationalism. Now, Dugin, for example, he embraces philosophical irrationalism to some degree because he argues that postmodernism gives Russia the ability to have its own reality. That's where I disagree. I am against philosophical irrationalism. I am in favor of rationalism. And I view philosophical irrationalism and liberalism as tied together and as the main danger. And I am telling you that illiberalism will triumph. Illiberalism, which doesn't celebrate the individual above all else, but instead celebrates the collective interests of humanity. Illiberalism will triumph. Human beings are collective in their nature. Collectivism manifests itself in conservatism and traditionalism, but also in socialism and economic collectivism and planned economies and anti-colonial struggles, etc. So it's complicated, but illiberalism is going to triumph, and liberalism has been taken to such ridiculous conclusions in the West that it can't triumph. And that I've popularized in a lot of my books. You'll find the phrase "the coming triumph of illiberalism," because illiberalism will triumph, because human beings in our nature are illiberal. There is no one in this world who can point to anything and say, "I made this all by myself." Right? You take a pen, right? You didn't make that by yourself. Thousands of people were involved in making the plastic, getting the oil out of the ground that led to the plastic, getting the ink, getting the metal. That pen is the result of thousands of people's collective efforts. And you say, well, what about an art, like a wood carver, right? The wood carver, he's an artistic wood carver. He carves things out of wood and he takes it to wood carving shows and sells it. He made that wood carving all by himself. No, he didn't, because he used tools, and those tools he used were made in factories, and they involved metal. And, I'm telling you that everything that exists in our time is the product of collective human labor, right? We are a collective species. Everything human beings have done is collective, right? You look at, all the buildings in the New York City skyline, you look at the satellites that are orbiting the Earth, everything is collective. So the idea that we can have a civilization that says individual above all else, and there's no grand narrative and there's no truth, it's not going to work. I tell people that the world we're living in right now is that, imagine you're driving down the road. You're driving down the road, and while you're driving down the road, you know where you're going, you know where you came from, you know how you're getting there. But imagine that you were driving down the road and suddenly you didn't know where you were going. Suddenly you didn't know where you came from. Suddenly you didn't know how you were getting there. What would you do? You would stop the car. Human beings need ideology, because ideology tells you where you came from, where you're going, how you're getting there. It gives you the ability to point to the map and say, this is where I am. It gives you the ability to define yourself. Philosophical irrationalism says anyone who tries to tell you where you came from, or tell you where you're going, or tell you how to get there is brainwashing you, and it's totalitarian, and you've got to deconstruct. You must deconstruct, right? You got to break apart any grand narrative. Anyone who tries to tell you where you're coming from or where you're going, you got to take it apart, because that's totalitarian. And it's leading to a lot of people that are very, very broken and lost, right? And this is excessive liberalism, right? Nietzsche is like, oh, the Übermensch defines for himself where he came from and where he's going, and no one tells it to him. And then Derrida or all these postmodernists are like, oh, and ripping apart narratives, and this is all leading to a disaster, right? Human beings need a roadmap. They do, and philosophical irrationalism will fail. But it is the elite fearing the masses and fearing the collectivism and celebrating their position of superiority, and fearing that collectivism will take that position of superiority away. And that's what they fear. And we have to just push back against philosophical irrationalism. And the neocon writer philosophical irrationalists, and Leo Strauss, was the philosophy professor who used Plato's writing about the philosopher kings and all that to justify his philosophical irrationalism. But, Hannah Arendt, Susan Sontag, they are very much philosophical irrationalism of the left, right? That they used the fear of fascism, right? Fascism is obviously a bad thing, but they used like anti-fascism, but a new kind of anti-fascism, right? They drew from Adorno and his concept of the authoritarian personality. And they talked about fascism just being mass movements. Susan Sontag said communism is nothing but the most effective form of fascism. Hannah Arendt wrote a book called Eichmann in Jerusalem, about how Eichmann was just a normal person, because deep down normal people are all just a bunch of Nazis and a bunch of evil Nazis, and that's why we need to control them. And that the fear of the people, the idea that the people are bad and the people if they get into motion, will create some kind of authoritarianism that will suppress the great elite and impose a grand narrative upon them. That is very much what philosophical irrationalism is. And that is the ideology of decaying imperialism. It's Friedrich Nietzsche. It's the blonde beast, right? He celebrated the blonde beast, right? That he argued that Europe was being de-Christianized as it was becoming a colonizer. That as we were colonizing Africa and all that, we're no longer following Christian pretenses. We were becoming barbarians, and we were becoming purely selfish and living by might makes right, and all the evil things that were being done by colonialism and imperialism, Friedrich Nietzsche saw as great, because we're breaking out of the moral constraints of what he called slave religion, Christianity. He said the doctrine of the lowly makes for lowliness, and he thought Christianity restrained the Übermenschen, right? I mean, this is philosophical irrationalism, right? And the idea that morality restrains the ability of the strong to just ruthlessly rule over the weak. This is dangerous stuff, and that's Friedrich Nietzsche, though, right? And philosophical irrationalism. And that's what you'll learn in college. That's what they really push very hard in the universities. Philosophical irrationalism. And it's the same as you get on Netflix, and it's the same as everywhere. They're constantly trying to inoculate you against joining a mass movement, against following leaders who will mobilize you to fight for justice. I mean, it's like they know what's coming, right? The coming triumph of illiberalism is coming. We are going to defeat imperialism. We are going to defeat globalist imperialism, and we're going to build a whole new world. I'm working on my book on Khrushchev right now, Khrushchevism, where I talk, and I've got the chapter on Jerry Healy is already available, and that they have really inculcated people and our society with philosophical irrationalism, anti-humanism. That is really the pessimistic ideology of decaying imperialism. I mean, in the book on Luigi Mangione and the Brian Thompson, American Years of Lead book, in the 3rd chapter, I talk about abstract art and how abstract art is an expression of philosophical irrationalism. So, I'm doing great work, folks, and we are doing great work as an organization. I'm really excited for my upcoming trip to Chicago and for the upcoming LA workshop. There's a lot of outreach going on, but please help us if you can. Help us print the book, right? Send us a contribution to offset the printing costs. We do need some help, printing this book. So, you can Cash App me, Caleb Maupin 22, or you can just you can donate on the GoFundMe. We could use your help to get this book out there. Please help us. And we're building a mass movement because that's what this country urgently needs. We urgently need a mass movement. And, that's where we're at. So there we go. You never told me where you would be last time. What? Joseph Johnson, I'm not understanding you, my friend. What do you mean? I never told you where I would be. I never told you where I would be. What you want me to announce my location? That's pretty weird. Gotta say. At the LA workshop, when you came to Chicago, well, we had a workshop. If you signed up and attended, I was there. I was there all day, and there were 25 people, 30 people who came to that workshop. If you had come to the workshop, you would have gotten to see me. Yeah. And, come to our event coming up. We got an event, Midwest Conference Center, July 12th. Be there. Yeah, Chicago is a big place, but this has a particular address. Come and attend. And if you had come to our workshop that we did in October, you would have seen me, right? I don't generally report, my location every place I'm going to be, but when we have an event like this one, I'm there. So come to this event. It'll be at the Midwest Conference Center. Come to our workshop in Los Angeles, sign up, register. We'll follow up with you and get you there. But yeah, there you go. Yeah. I'll be at the Midwest Conference Center, July 12th. That's where I'll be. All right. Has anybody here seen Cali? Why am I singing that? Anyway. All right, folks. Well, listen, it's been fun. It's been good. I will be back. So, yeah, I'm going to put on the closing music. So, yeah, good times. Good times. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.